Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Doc of Detox show. Today we have another great show. Today's show is Healing with Light and Color. It's a live Q&A with Anadi Martel. And this guy, I've never spoke to anybody that speaks like him, that understands color, understands light, and understands what we truly are, okay? Understand something, and it's really important. I've said this before. Until you realize that you are 99% and even more than that, a light energy being, okay, you are not going to be able to live to your full potential or ever know what true permanent healing is on this planet. And if you want to live a pain-free life, okay, then you've got to understand something, that you are a light energy being, and everywhere you look, you want to say to yourself, am I eating light? Am I drinking light? Am I thinking light? Am I hanging around with other light energy beings? That would be people that don't cause drama or trauma, because guess what? You know what? Did you ever say, I feel dark? Okay, things are gone dark. And remember something, there's only one dimmer switch in your body and in your mind and in your life, and that is you. So before we get started, you're going to love this show, because this is the science about light. Not just some philosophy, but this is the science of light and color, and it's backed with science, and it's real science, okay? But before we get started, I would like to talk about taking your power back. Better still, how would you like to learn how to keep it and never give it away again, okay? You want to go to itioh.com and take a look at our personalized treatment and trainings, okay? That's where we will actually come to you anywhere around the world with one of our master trainers and teach you how to create the perfect day on a mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual way. Okay? And we will teach you the world's most powerful body work, and we will train you how to do it so that you can do it on your family, on your friends, how you can take it back. And listen, if you're a health professional, you've always wanted to be, but you know what? You said, I don't have the time and I don't have the money and you can't live your dream. Well, yeah, you can live your dream. And now listen to me, until you live your passion, you'll never fulfill your dream, all right? So go to itioh.com and take a look at our certification courses. We're gonna be in Kelowna, and we'll be doing that pretty soon. It's only a few weeks away. And then we're going to be in California this year. We're gonna be in Florida. We're gonna be in Texas, okay? So we're coming your way. And understand something. Do not hesitate. 3, 2, 1, you got this. Push through your fears, and unleash that hidden practitioner from within, okay? So, here we are. Yesterday, we did the Light and Color show with Anadi Martel, and I'm telling you, I want to thank everybody. It was explosive. I can't believe how many people actually watch this show, and especially this time of year. So we can tell that people are really wakening up. And you know what they say, they don't know that you've been asleep until you do wake up. So, Anadi, welcome to the show.
Hello, Darrell. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, well, it's definitely my pleasure. And so shall we jump right into the questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, so here it is. Frank from Chicago asks, are ultraviolet light always dangerous?
Well, actually not. You need ultraviolet light, otherwise you wouldn't be healthy. So it's really a matter of balance with ultraviolet light.
Well,
UV,
how much is too much?
well, it can easily get too much because then it leads to, of course, skin cancer. That's what everybody's afraid of. And it's a very real risk. So, but again, it's a matter of balance.
Yeah,
It's a matter of
everything is a
getting
matter of
enough
balance.
UV for your needs, but not too much until it can harm your skin. And it's not so difficult to get the proper amount. You just have to be aware and sensitive to the state of your skin when you are in the sun. For
Because
some people, maybe a few minutes. You were saying something?
I was just going to say, because the sun is not dangerous, okay? It's our mind that's dangerous. I mean, if you think that you're a piece of bacon and you want to get fried, you're going to get fried. I mean, anybody knows that when you start to get a bit of a glow or a little bit of redness on your skin, then it should be over, right? And you shouldn't be doing that. It's like everything else. You know, you can drink too much water, you can eat too much food, you can get too much sleep. So I think it's just about balance,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so do try to get a bit of sun once in a while, just being very aware of what you're doing. But it's certainly not recommended to avoid constantly all sun because you fear ultraviolet light.
Right.
You need a bit for your vitamin D synthesis, and most of us are lacking vitamin D.
Let me ask you a question. So the farther you go north, okay, the less sun, the less vitamin D you can get from the sun. Am I correct about that?
Mm-hmm. Correct, yes.
Okay, so what we do is, yeah, you can take vitamin D. And for myself, I'm not telling anybody else to do this, but I'll do 15,000 IUs a day. And then I'll do 50,000 IUs in the morning and at night if I feel I'm really under stress or I'm coming down with something. But
Yeah.
now that I went, and what we do now is we carry what's called a vitamin D light. So I just do a vitamin D light every day instead of doing the supplement. Okay?
Right. There are indeed light devices that will that use UV to help you get vitamin D if you don't have access to
Right.
bright sunlight. It's can be a very good thing. And as you say, the farther north you go, the less the sun will be bright enough to actually synthesize a proper amount of vitamin D. And it also depends on the season, naturally. Like in Canada, it's only really in the warmest part of the summer that you can get any significant vitamin D. In wintertime, even at noontime, you won't get much.
And you know what?
do need some kind of support,
Yeah, and
such as
people don't
supplements or an artificial light.
Right. And people don't realize this. They don't realize that the more north you go, the more deficient you're going to be. And people do not realize that vitamin D is not a vitamin. It's a hormone regulator. It's a immunomodulator. And it's one of the most important things that we need. And that's why we
Right.
brought on the vitamin D lights to our patients, because there's just a lot of people that are really starving that. And they are starving from that.
Yes. And the vitamin D that you get from light is actually more bioavailable than what you get from supplements. There are secondary effects when you take too much supplements
Right.
that you will never get when you get your vitamin D from light.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's self-regulating. The biological, photobiological phenomena that generates vitamin D from light on your skin
Right.
will regulate, so you never get too much.
Absolutely. So, Derek from Victoria asks, what's the best time of the day to take a sun bath?
Well, the idea is to maximize vitamin D synthesis while minimizing risks of sunburn and the cancer risks that are associated with sunburn.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the ratio between these two things, it gets highest right when the sun is highest in the sky at around noontime. That's when you'll get most efficient vitamin D synthesis
Right.
with the minimum proportion of exposure to sunburn. And that means you go for a short time with the maximum area of skin possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really the optimal way to get most of your vitamin D without risking sunburn. If you wait, for example, late in the day, in the afternoon or later, you can still get enough sun to get a sunburn, but you will get very little vitamin D from that sun because it's not anymore at the highest.
Yeah, so we want it
Peak.
at the highest peak, and that's how we're going to get the most out of vitamin D. And if I can say one
Correct.
other thing, everybody that's watching on Instagram, I know that you can't get the two-way conversation here. So if you switch over to YouTube, okay, or Facebook, you're going to get the two-way conversation. All right? Great. So Lee from Moncton asks, why should we avoid computer screens at night?
Well, it's the issue of chronobiology that we talked about in yesterday's show. It's the fact that our inner rhythm, our circadian rhythm, is regulated by the amount of light we get through our eyes. That's what's used by the body to reset our inner clock,
Right.
the bright light of midday.
Okay.
And as we said then, the part of the spectrum that our eye uses to affect this synchronization of our clock is the blue part of the spectrum. It's blue light. And computer screens, especially when they have LEDs in the backlight, which is basically most of our computer screens, emit quite a bit of blue light. So they will fool your inner clock into believing that it's still daytime. Even if the screen doesn't seem so bright, if you look at its spectrum, it's got quite a bit of this blue that's exactly in the range where your circadian rhythm is synchronized to. So it has a more effect than you would think just from the brightness.
So yeah, so I was told that Google owns the blue light technology, and they could have probably done something else, couldn't they? They didn't have to make it blue light. So, but I guess in reality, that if you were going to own a technology, you would want blue light because that would keep everybody awake no matter what time of the day, so they could shop online and not fall asleep. What do you think? What do you think? Huh?
I don't know about that, Darrell, but the blue in the LEDs actually comes from a very simple technical reason.
Right.
It's because even when you look at a white LED light bulb, it seems to be white,
Right.
but in fact, the light source inside is a blue light source, pure
Okay.
blue. And there is inside the bulb some phosphors that take this blue light and convert it into a white spectrum that appears to your eye as white.
Right.
And the reason the blue source is used is that currently, with the current state of technology, it's the most efficient LED that we can manufacture.
Do you mean most
The LED
efficient,
that will
or
convert to blue light.
do you mean most efficient or least expensive?
Most efficient.
Okay, all right. So it's most efficient. So that's why they're doing it.
So it's the and also because now it's mass produced, they are also the cheapest. But the blue LED, actually, there was a Nobel Prize given to the Japanese physicist who discovered it. It's a major discovery, and that's really what has enabled the LED lighting that we see happening now all around us.
Yeah,
It's the
but
fact that we can create this very efficient LED in the blue part of the spectrum.
well, it's very efficient, but isn't it destroying the eyesight? Isn't it causing macular degeneration, even glaucoma, cataracts, you name it? Just even dry eye syndrome, irritation. Doesn't it disrupt melatonin and the other hormones and chemicals in the body?
Again, it's a matter of balance. In the sense that blue light, of course, is in itself is fine. There is plenty of blue light in sunlight.
Okay.
The problem is when the proportions get stray far from the natural proportions. And that's what happens in some of the LED lights that are on the market. They have much higher part of blue in their spectrum than you would see, for example, in natural sunlight.
Right.
And so again, it's this balance. You have to regulate the amount of blue to bring it back to an amount that's similar to what we get from natural light.
But that's not happening on computer screens or telephones or iPads or gaming, is it? Is that, I mean,
No, in their normal setting, they will have a high proportion of blue. Otherwise, the colors that you look at would not appear so well balanced. And so that's the price to pay. And as we mentioned, there are tools, for example, Night Shift on Apple computers or Flux on Windows computer that will automatically filter out the blue light in your screen at night. And then the screen becomes more yellowish.
yeah, I don't like to do it when I'm doing a show, but I wear these all the time, and these are called Tesla Lightwear, and they've got fluorine lenses in them, and they'll actually that I think that's probably, if you're going to be on computer and you're going to watch TV, LED TV, you're going to be in the mall, you're going to be in the airport, you're going to be in a hospital, you're going to be wherever there's artificial light. I think you have to wear protection. It's like anything else. I mean, we're going to overdose on this stuff.
It's true that blue blocking glasses like the ones you just showed are indeed the best solution for nighttime.
Yeah, but these aren't
vision.
blue. These aren't blue blockers though. So they're
Right.
actually a Tesla fluorine lens. They don't really block it. They take the blue light and convert it and make it into a more healing ray. A blue blocker, I know it blocks out a certain percentage, but you don't get the same feeling. Like when you put these on, you can be feeling blue light toxic, and right away it's going to take your headache down, bring the tension down, and you can feel your eyes are resting, and they're not like on guard, right?
Sounds very good.
Yeah. Anyway, so James from Liverpool asks, are LEDs healthy?
LEDs as such are neither healthy nor unhealthy. LEDs are extremely flexible. You can make an immense variety of LEDs which will have different spectrum
Right.
And which will have different optic properties. It's an extremely flexible technology. And the thing is that you can make whatever you want out of it. So it's more it's a matter of selecting the vast variety of commercial products that are available.
And
And
guess
the problem
what?
is that
Can we?
the commonly available LED light bulbs are not necessarily the healthiest ones.
Now you have a device called, what's it called again?
The little light B,
Yeah, the little light bee. And everybody, you should. They're $95 Canadian. So all you Americans, I mean, you're looking at around maybe $70, $73, something like that. I mean, and can you tell everybody what the little light bee does, please?
well, it lets you monitor at least one of the troubles that
Yeah.
you get with LED light bulbs, and that is the what's called light noise. There's two issues with LEDs you have to watch for. One is the spectrum, especially the excess of blue in the spectrum.
Yeah.
And the second one is light noise. It's the fact that the light that's emitted by the light bulb is not stable. It's fluctuating, it's pulsing very quickly,
Yeah.
too quickly for your eye to see it.
Right.
But still, that fast pulsation does have a detrimental effect on you. It creates a stress. It can create migraine and eye strain and so on. So you want to avoid this type of light noise, of pulsing light, because there's no reason for it really. It's very simple to get light bulbs which don't have this phenomenon. It's just a matter of selecting them properly. And the trouble is that it's not standardized. There's no regulation controlling this, so manufacturers don't have to either specify how much light noise their product emits, or they don't mention it anywhere. So the consumer has no real way to find out which light bulbs are emitting high noise and which are not. So that's why I made this little device which lets you monitor very quickly whether the LED light bulb that you want to use is clean, I mean, emits a very stable light, or has a very highly noisy light output.
Yeah, and can you give everybody your website again so they can go and take a look at your little light bee? Okay.
Right, it's Sensora, SENSORA.com, Sensora.com.
Thank you.
My different instruments are shown here.
Beautiful. And everybody, like I said before, if you're on Instagram, you can always pop over to Facebook or YouTube right now, and you'll get both sides of the conversation. So before we go any further, there's lots of questions, but you have another device, and that's called, what's it called again? With the globe?
The Sensosphere, maybe? Yeah, the globe, the Sensosphere.
Yeah, do you have that there?
Actually,
if you don't.
there are different versions.
Yeah.
There's a small one here, but it doesn't look like much like this. It looks like a white globe, because you can't get colors really coming out nicely out of a webcam. It's kind of doesn't really show the beauty of colors at all.
Yeah, sure. I just want people to know And I want you to go to his website and read about this, okay? And it might be something that you might want as a gift to create that beautiful harmony, balance, that really at peace feeling. So you might want to go check that out on his website. All right. So Loretta from Regina asks, what are the healthiest types of light bulbs?
Well, as we said, LED light bulbs have their issues for sure. You have to be careful with them.
Yeah.
Um, and fluorescent light bulbs actually are not much better. They might be even worse in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
Because in terms of the spectrum that they emit, it's a spectrum that's very far from the spectrum of natural sunlight. Instead of a nice continuous spectrum of all light frequencies, fluorescents emit very sharp lines of light. And some of these lines are right on the blue. That is a problem for circadian disruption. So fluorescent lights often also have this high proportion of blue, which we discussed, and which is not something you want in your environment, especially at night.
Right.
And fluorescent lights also have usually light noise as well. And they, of course, have the added issue of mercury. Their light, they have light that is based on mercury vapor, so they're very toxic if you break them. And even the mercury rays, the spectrum that comes out, can re-excite the mercury that you have in your own body through resonance, because you're really projecting light, mercury light, basically. But that's another issue. So, in fact, if you look at the availability of different technologies, the best one, the healthiest one, is still the good old incandescent and halogen light bulb.
Halogen.
Because these emit, they emit a spectrum that's very similar to the sun spectrum, so it's a natural spectrum. And they don't have an excess of blue. And they also have a lot of infrared, near infrared, which is another issue. The trouble with these efficient technologies, such as LEDs and fluorescent, is that they've been engineered to remove the infrared part of the light that's emitted because it's considered as waste energy. It doesn't bring light, it just brings heat.
Right.
But in fact, this is ignoring a very important biological aspect of light, and that is the healing properties of deep red and near infrared light. It's the part of the spectrum that will act to heal cells through photobiomodulation. We mentioned that phenomenon in yesterday's talk. And it's actually quite important to get that red and near infrared light for the health of your cells. And you get it normally from sunlight. In nature, there's plenty of near infrared because, as you know, the sunlight is hot.
Yes.
So when you take LED fluorescent light bulbs, which are highly efficient in terms of energy, they don't emit at all near infrared, or very little. So they have an excess of blue and they have a lack of infrared. And so that's why you get such an unbalanced spectrum that has detrimental effects on health. Incandescent and halogen light bulbs have this perfect balance, the same as you get in sunlight. Less blue and more red infrared. So of course, they're disappearing. They've been outlawed in the interest of energy efficiency. And people who work with light and healing are quite perturbed by this trend, and it seems like what's been done or decreed in the interest of energy efficiency and climate change and so on to reduce the carbon that we emit, we've forcing a shift to these LED and fluorescent light bulbs without being aware of the health consequences. And we might end up paying more in the end.
If I can say something,
high health expenses.
And it's only just a personal statement, and that is this: they didn't do it to be energy efficient. I don't believe that. I believe that, we're always getting sold one story and getting another, because all the health negative symptoms that are created, they end up feeding the corporations, and then people, they have pain, they suffer, they can't sleep because of all this. So then they got to take sleeping pills, or they got to take something to reduce the pain. So you know what? I don't believe the energy efficient thing, because we already know that we can make energy for free or close to it without taxing nature. So that statement is not true. Not true in my books. And there's always enough of everything on this planet for everyone except for the greedy. But anyways, Richard from Houston asks, how deeply does light penetrate the body?
That's a good question. If you want light to heal your cells, you of course would wonder, how deep does it go in your body? Does it just touch the skin, the surface, or does it actually penetrate to deeper tissues? And it turns out that it depends on the color of light. Blue light, for example, doesn't penetrate deep at all. It's barely a fraction of a millimeter. Whereas the longer the wavelength, when you go towards red and near infrared, light penetrates deeper and deeper. And in fact, the near infrared light can go quite deep in the body. And it's easy to see. For example, if you put a light bulb, a flashlight through the palm of your hand, you will see light coming out of the other end if the flashlight is quite intense. It'll be reddish light coming out on the other side of your hand. And that shows that the red color has gone through a good inch of tissue. So red light penetrates quite deeply in the body, and that's why it's used in photobiomodulation to heal things like injured muscles and tendon issues and so on, because it does go quite deep in the body. And it can even go through the cranium. There's a whole branch of light medicine that's called transcranial light therapy, where you will take intense red and infrared light sources over the head, and it will actually go through this. Maybe 2 or 3% of the infrared light will penetrate the cranium and reach your brain cells, your neurons. And there are forms of light therapy which apply light directly to the brain, and it's being shown to be very helpful, both for physical issues like strokes and so on, Parkinson, and also for mental issues like depression and other, even dementia and so on. So there's interesting research going on with using red and infrared light to heal the brain as well.
Beautiful. Carmen from Denver asks, oh, and before we go on to the next question, everyone, feel free to call in. We do have an 800 number. It's 855-900-4544, extension 7. And I don't know, people are really shy. They don't mind sending in lots of questions. They just don't want to get on the phone. But if you'd like to get on the phone and talk directly to us, we're here. Carmen from Denver asks, what are biophotons?
Fascinating subject. Biophotons are very mysterious things. They're actually photons, light particles, emitted by your own body. Most of us don't realize that we emit light, not only, of course, in the spiritual sense, but in the actual physical sense. We emit a very tiny amount of light constantly. And these photons of light are called biophotons. And they were discovered early in the 1920s originally. And in the 60s, there's a famous physicist, Dr. Popp from Germany, Fritz Albert Popp, who explored them in depth and really launched the whole field of biophotons. And it turns out that these photons that are emitted by our cells might be a key to the process of light. They are not just any regular photons. They have specific properties. For example, they will be highly coherent. They'll have specific polarization properties. And there are studies which link the amount of biophotons and their coherence level with the degree of the health of your organism. There are even links, for example, with whether a person meditates or has a more quiet mind, then the biophotons that they will emit will have different properties. So these biophotons are quite fascinating, and they're not very well known because it's a tiny, tiny phenomenon. Right? These photons are invisible. There are so few, just a few per square centimeter per second. They're basically invisible to the eye. And to detect them, you need highly sensitive photodetectors. And when you have those highly sensitive instruments, you can actually measure them. And what we find is that you can find correlations between the biophoton emission and the health state of an organism. So there are indications that it might be used for healing and diagnostic purposes in the future. It's really a developing field right now.
I'd say that this falls underneath the saying that the invisible creates the physical. What do you think about that?
You could say that because these, let's say that it's a beautiful link between our physical part, the body and the atoms and so on, and our energetic part, which is more, of course, light is a pure form of energy. And you see that this light is directly generated by your body, by your living organism. So it's a kind of interface between life and matter, the light that comes out in this way.
Okay, so is the living organism, and is the living organism creating the light, or is the actual light energy creating the living organism? I mean, if we take a look at the beginning and we take a look at what we were before we entered this planet, entered the before the energy entered into the fetus, what do you think?
Well, ultimately, of course, all matter was born from energy early in the universe. Yeah. So you can say that all matter is frozen light. It's been said. So in a sense, I guess that's what you are referring to. Yeah. And constantly there is this interchange between matter and light. They're always transforming into each other. That's part of the nature of our reality.
E equals MC squared.
Exactly.
All right. So Christine from Sacramento says, what are, and I don't even know what these are, sub-delta frequencies?
Yeah, I talked about it in my book. Maybe that's why the question came up. There's a whole field of light therapy which uses pulsations in light to interact with our biorhythms through resonance. Because when you're exposed to a pulsation that you can perceive with any of your sense, whether it's the eyes or the ear or the skin, when you're exposed to a stimulus that has the same frequency as one of your inner biorhythm, there will be a natural tendency for your body to synchronize with that external stimulus. And it turns out that it's a very efficient and beautiful therapy modality, because then it means through this external stimulus, which can be light or sound or so on, you can, for example, entrain your brain waves, which are slow rhythms from about 1 to 20 hertz, basically the main brainwave frequency ranges. And so depending on which part of this frequency range you will stimulate, you can help your brain to go towards the mental state associated with that part of the range. So you have alpha waves, beta waves, and so on. The slowest waves are the delta waves. They are the waves of deep sleep, and these are between about 1 and 4 hertz. A very slow rhythm, 1 per second. And it's been found that there are even lower frequencies that is below this delta range. That's why it's called sub-delta. These are frequencies that are slower than 1 hertz. So it means there are rhythms that will take more than 1 second to unfold. You can have, for example, 1/10 of a hertz, which is a cycle of 10 seconds. So if you imagine a light that's pulsing very slowly, it takes 10 seconds for the light to come on and off. It will entrain a different type of rhythm within you, below the normal brain waves. And it's been found in various studies that some of these very slow rhythms are quite important. And they can have an impact, for example, to help heal hypertension. They can help to heal chronic pain, fibromyalgia. These are phenomena that will be affected by these very slow sub-delta rhythms. So there are light therapy tools that use these very slow light rhythms to act at that level. And the sensosphere, which we mentioned, is an instrument that does work both with brainwaves and with sub-delta pulsations, much slower rhythms. You can feel intuitively if you have such a slow, long rhythm, it's very soothing and relaxing. It really brings you to a very, very different rhythm inside. So you can like perceive intuitively how it might work.
How much space would one of the smaller ones take? Could I put it in an office of, let's say, 25 by 20 or 35 by 20? Or...
Well, the sensosphere are not big. It's a 12-inch globe. It fits perfectly in any room, in the living room, in the bedroom.
Yeah, but how much?
There's another version, which is 16-inch, the professional version, which is more for group use. For example, yoga teachers will use them, or they're starting to be used in old retirement houses for older people.
Yes.
Because you can then use rhythms, for example, in the gamma range to work with dementia and so on. So no, these are tools that light tools that can be used anywhere.
Do I have to be looking at it?
Not necessarily, because they will radiate a soft colored light in the environment. And even if it's indirect, this very soft pulsation will be in the environment. So you can do both.
How far out do the waves reach?
Well, it's. I mean, if you put it in a regular sized room, it will have an effect. For example, it's being used currently in schools for kids with which are on the autism spectrum or who have ADHD problems, and so they will use one of these globes at the front of the school, the school room. So you can imagine the schoolroom is quite big. There may be 20 or 30 students. And just this globe at one end of the room is sufficient to have an effect that can be monitored.
All right, that sounds great. So, well, I definitely want one. Okay, so Evelyn from Ottawa asks, what is malillumination?
That's a term that was coined by John Ott, who was a researcher in the 50s and 60s. He was one of the first ones to alert people about the possibility that as much as light can be healing and healthy, it can also be unhealthy, depending on its spectrum and depending on its properties. And when you're exposed to deficient lighting, this is what he called malillumination. And when do you get that kind of issue? Well, you get it just as we described. You get it with fluorescent lighting, where some parts of the spectrum are missing. You get it with LED light bulbs, which have unbalanced light spectrum or which have high light noise. So it's a way to describe lighting that appears to the naked eye. If you don't look carefully, it appears fine. You can see, you can work under this light. but it's actually light that will not be conducive to harmony and to good health. So this is where you have to be aware of the subtle properties of light to find out what's required to have healthy lighting versus mal-illuminating light.
Thank you. Maxine from San Antonio asks, what is color temperature?
It's something that you often hear about now that we have LED light bulbs, because it's often said that the LED light bulb will be warm white or cool white. And there's usually a temperature degree that's sometimes listed on the LED bulb. It can be, for example, 2700 K or 5000 K. The K refers to Kelvin, which is a unit of temperature. And it's a way to describe the spectrum emitted by the light bulb. Because you have different forms of white color. What we call white is just the sum total of many, many frequencies of light. The whole rainbow actually can be the whole rainbow. When you take all colors from the rainbow and you mix them together, you get what the eye perceives as white. But there are different shades of white, as you know very well. There are some whites that are yellowish. There are some whites that are greenish, some that are bluish. So the color temperature is a way to describe or to quantify these different shades of white. And it's actually related to what's called in physics a black body, which is kind of an abstraction in physics that describes a pure source of light. And depending on the temperature of the source of light, it will have a spectrum that can be very clearly defined, that physicists have been able to calculate since the early 20th century. And these spectrums, depending on the temperature of this black body, will have different shades of white. Now, in practice for us, then it means that if a thermal source has a high temperature, high color temperature, it will emit a very bluish type of white, because blue is the most energetic part of the spectrum. The blue photons have more energy than the lower wavelength photons. So when you have a very hot source, it will tend to be bluish because it has more energy. And conversely, if you have a cooler source, less high color temperature, it will appear more yellowish because it will have less energetic photons, more in the red part of the spectrum. So basically, this color temperature, this degree level, gives you an indication of the kind of the tint of the white that you're dealing with. And it's a little paradoxical because, as I just mentioned, the low color temperature gives you yellowish light, and the high color temperature gives you bluish light. And in fact, we associate blue usually to something cold. And that's why if you look at an LED light bulb which has a high color temperature, it will be described as cool white. So it's kind of the opposite of what you would expect, because we're talking about high temperature, high color temperature. You would think it's going to be hot, but no, it's called cool white. So sometimes it's confusing to people, these two opposite ways to describe the same light. And there's a very simple reason for that. It's just that these are associations that we make in everyday life. For example, when we see ice in winter, it's bluish, and that's why we associate blue with something cold. So when you say cool white, it's because it looks blue, and in common everyday association, we associate blue with coldness. And it's the opposite. We also associate red with something hot, with fire and so on. So if it's more reddish or yellowish color, it's called warm white because the association is with something hotter. But in fact, if you look at the color temperature, it is lower.
What about
So it's a
like
bit confusing.
a blue flame? A blue flame, isn't that hotter than a red flame?
Exactly.
Okay,
It's much higher, much hotter.
right.
But you'll call the blue flame cool white, and you'll call the red flame more warm white. So it's paradoxical.
Yeah, there you go. Anyways, James from Instagram, what can I learn and expect from your book?
The book, I tried to give an overall picture of the whole field of light and healing. So it really describes the history of light healing, where it comes from in the ancient past, and the recent evolution, and how it transformed into today's light medicine, a whole new field in full expansion. So it gives you that historical context, and who are the people most important and making it happen, the physicists and the healers and so on. And then there's a description of all the different modalities of using light for healing, because there are so many ways to use light. There's a great variety of modalities based on light, which will have completely different fields of application. So the book describes pretty much all of what's available today, and the state of the art, basically, in all these different ways of using light.
Excellent.
And so, and I cover both the light medicine aspect, which is to say the official medical uses of light, and also more the alternative medical uses, more the energy medicine uses of light. Because light is such a universal phenomena, it really covers both these fields. You have applications of light which are very physical, which are well described by medicine, and you have other applications of light which are much more subtle, which deal more with the mind, with consciousness, and so on, and which are better described with subtle energy medicine. So the book really it tries to be balanced in the sense that it covers both areas of using light.
Beautiful. Kim asked, why do you believe light therapy was suppressed in the early 1900s?
It was actually in the early, yeah. Well, that's if you look at the history of light medicine, there was in late 19th century and early 20th century, there was a real explosion of discoveries, and many doctors and scientists, because new technologies enabled the creation of new forms of light, artificial light, and so on. The incandescent light, the arc lights, these were all discovered around that time. So many scientists explored how to use that light for healing, and they discovered new ways to use light. And so there was, in the early 1900s, there was a real, it's been called by some of the people working in the field the golden age of light medicine in a way. And one of the first Nobel Prizes in medicine was given for light therapy to Dr. Finson, as we mentioned in yesterday's show. So there was a lot of interest at that time in light medicine. And what happened is that there was a big shift in the whole medical field, because in the 1930s and 40s, biochemical medicine really came on its at the great expansion. This is the time where antibiotics were discovered, and so a whole new form of medicine was developed that had much more direct applications, more rapid, more quicker than more softer ways of healing, which such as those using light. And there was really a whole movement to suppress all these alternative forms of medicine, whether we talk about light or homeopathy or naturopathy and so on. There was really a push by the medical world and the biochemical industry, pharmaceutical industry, to suppress these alternative therapies. And they were quite successful in suppressing this. The second half of the 20th century, basically, there was no light medicine at all. No respectable doctor or scientist dared touch light as a form of medicine, because it was thoroughly discredited by the FDA and by the pharmaceutical industry. So it took a number of new discoveries in the late 20th centuries and early 21st to change the situation and give back to light its nobility, if you like, in the medical field. And this is where we are now. Now light is being researched as never before as a form of healing.
Yeah, if I can make just a statement. For those of you who want to go to my library, Doc of Detox Library, check out Medical Mafia. I give the whole history of what happened around 1910. It only took from 1910 to 1920 to wipe out over 120 universities and colleges in Canada and United States. It was called the Flexner Report, where the Rothschilds and the Carnegies gave $10 million, which is a lot of money back then, to the AMA that was ready to go bankrupt around 1910, and said, if you can shut down all these schools, then we'll make sure that you're never without money again. And I guess their dream came true. Steve asks, you mentioned earlier, Steve asks, and he's from YouTube, how was light able to cure tuberculosis?
It was mostly the blue and ultraviolet part of the spectrum that were acting on the skin. Mm-hmm. And so you would basically destroy virulent cells, damaged cells with this light. So, for example, there was a Swiss doctor, Dr. Rollier, who worked a lot at that time, and he had opened sanatoriums high in the Swiss mountains, because the higher you go, the more ultraviolet light penetrates the atmosphere, so you would get a higher content of UV. And you would expose people with tuberculosis to this high mountain light, of course, very gradually, because you have to be very careful not to cause skin burn or cancer risks. But actually, if you look at the story of Rollier, in the thousands of people that he cured or that he helped, I believe there's not a single case of cancer came up from his treatment. So that goes to show that UV is not that automatically dangerous and a cause of cancer if it's properly used. But so Rollier was one of the main researchers, and Dr. Finsen that I just mentioned was another one. He's the one who got the Nobel Prize. He was using arc lights, very strong artificial light, which emit lots of high energy photons, and he would focus it on the. He was working especially with lupus vulgaris, which attacks the skin on the face. People would get disfigured by this disease. And he was able to cure them in a much more efficient way than any other treatments available in those days.
Excellent. So now we've got Bill from YouTube wanting to know, what did you mean by people can actually have a color allergy in the show yesterday?
That's actually a concept that has been developed by Dr. Jacob Lieberman, who is a pioneer in the use of light and colors for healing. He wrote a book in the 90s called Light Medicine of the Future, which really helped to change the scene, to rehabilitate the light as a form of medicine. And what Jacob has found is that in the same way as we are attracted to some colors, we know that each of us, we have our favorite colors that we love. There are also other colors which we don't like so much, which we tend to avoid. And this is the whole field of chromotherapy. It's our relation with different colors. And it's a field that that touches with many different aspects of us. It touches with psychology, it touches with cognitive science, it touches with the visual system. Color is a very difficult thing to quantify. And one reason for that is that we have each of us has a very subjective relation to color. We have, as we said, our colors, favorite colors, and we have other colors that we dislike. And sometimes there are causes for that. For example, there may have been some traumatic experiences where we associated a certain color with an event or a trauma that has been a problem in the distant past, and which we may even have forgotten. And it frequently happens in such cases that the color that's associated with the trauma will you will tend to avoid it, and if you're exposed to it, it will bring back up aspects of this trauma. And in fact, there are many forms of therapy, of chromotherapy, using colors, which make use of this fact. And if it's in the hands of a qualified therapist, you can make use of these colors, which will trouble you. Those that we call colors where you have what could be called an allergy. And if you, for example, if you are exposed to it in small doses gradually, it can help to bring back up memories that have disappeared, or help to process hidden traumas. For example, so it's a process similar to what's being done with PTSD and so on. So we can use colors to work at that level. So there are specific forms of therapy, light therapy, working at that level.
Beautiful. Again, from YouTube, Frida asks, why does light bother my eyes, even sunlight?
We each have a very personal relation with light and colors. Some of us are highly sensitive to brightness. Some of us are sensitive to some colors. So it varies a lot from person to person. And there may be different causes, physical causes, some healing, some health problems can increase our sensitivity to light. So it may simply be your personal makeup, or it can be something that's related to a health issue that you have that's temporary. But indeed, if you find yourself easily blinded by light, then you have to if it's something that's constant in your life, then that's part of what you are. You have to adapt to it. If it's something that is coming on suddenly, you might try to find out the cause, because it might be a symptom of a health issue.
Thank you. And also, I just want to let you know, Frida, if you're out there, tomorrow we're going to be doing the live Q&A, which is Friday. We do them every Monday and Friday. I will answer your question on the live Q&A the best of my ability for what I know. And also, there's another question here from Christine. How and where can I wear the Tesla glasses? I'll answer that also tomorrow on Facebook. Okay? Ilana asks, can you cure cancer with light energy? And that's from Facebook again.
That's a tough one. There is no form of light therapy that deals directly with cancer currently. Like photobiomodulation is not much help. Neither is UV and so on. So there's no direct and obvious way to deal with cancer with light therapy currently, except some medical techniques such as photodynamic therapy, PDT. But this type of technique is rather just a different form of chemotherapy more than light therapy. PDT is a way to create chemotherapy agents that will be activated by light. So you inject those molecules in the tumor, and then you expose the tumor to light, and then these molecules will suddenly become toxic because of the effect of the light, and they will destroy the tumor. So there are very specific applications of PDT for some cancers, which are quite effective. And in where where it works, often it has less secondary effects than chemotherapy, standard chemotherapy, or radiotherapy. So this is one way of using light, in indirect way, I would say, because it's more a form of light-activated chemotherapy. But that being said, the cancer is, of course, can be considered a global sickness. Of course, there is a tumor somewhere, but it's often the origin will be an imbalance in your whole energy. And in this sense, you can use different forms of light healing, chromotherapy, and so on, to help to rebalance your whole energy field, with the hope that it will have an indirect beneficial effect on the cancer. So that there would be indirect healing through more general forms of light therapy.
Right.
So we have, again, light is such a universal phenomenon. You can attack different health issues from all kinds of different light modalities.
Yeah, and every illness in the body is due to some kind of physical block, which creates an energy block. So we have to remove the physical block to get the energy to come back into balance. I have one more question, and that's from Lori, okay? And this is again from Instagram. Can you link the study on depression, light therapy, compared to Prozac? Oh, can you put up the study that you mentioned about how they studied light and then they studied Prozac and saw that they had equal benefits, the same benefits?
Yeah, that study did cause quite an uproar in the medical community when it came out. That was in 2015, I believe, 2016. What they did, actually, they combined many different studies from previous years. It was a comparative study, and they found that on average, interventions using bright light therapy, this is circadian resynchronization, they found was as effective as typical antidepressive drugs such as Prozac. The effects were about as good or even better sometimes. And of course, many people in the medical community were not too happy to hear this. But it did. There are many more studies since then that are confirming this trend, and they're finding that this circadian rhythm entrainment is a powerful factor in many forms of depression, not just seasonal affective depression, SAD, but also regular depressions and even treatment-resistant forms of depression. When you help the person to resynchronize their inner rhythm, their circadian rhythm, you find that it has a direct effect on the depressive state for many people. So it's just getting more and more confirmed that many different forms of depression are now being treated with bright light therapy.
Beautiful. Okay, so now that we've come to the end of the questions, I would like to know what you would like to leave our listeners with, and I would like you to, but first, can you tell them your website, the name of your book, and is there any way that they can contact you or leave questions? Can they do it on your website?
No, not directly. There is a website that deals with the book itself. The book is called Light Therapies, and the website is simply light-therapies.com.
Beautiful.
And on that website, you'll get information on the book, and also you get a link to write me. And so I often get questions through that channel. Otherwise, the website that describes my light therapy instruments is called Sensora, SENSORA.com. And well, you ask what would I leave our listeners with? Again, it's this idea that light is such a basic and fundamental force in our life, and that it acts at all levels of our being, the body, the mind, the spirit, and our consciousness. All levels are affected by light. And we just mentioned depression, such a universal phenomenon as depression. So many people are affected by it. If you look at depression, you can find actually 3 different modalities of light that can help, light therapy that can help with depression. You have, as we just mentioned, bright light therapy that will work with re-entraining your inner clock, your circadian rhythm. You also have photobiomodulation. As we mentioned, light through the cranium can help to give energy to re-energize neurons. And it's been found that this can have an impact on depression as well. And then you can use colors, chromotherapy, because through colors can bring joy and can bring back your joy of life if they're used properly with instruments that bring them with great purity and in the right proportions. So 3 very different ways to work with light in dealing with the same issue, depression. It just gives you an example of how universal light is in our life.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you for doing the show yesterday and also for answering all these questions today for all our listeners. And I'm hoping...
My great pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that maybe we'll have you back down the road. Would that be great, or would that be great?
Yes, indeed.
It'd be great for our listeners. So let me know in the future when you'd like to come back on the show. I want to thank you so much for all the brilliant information, and I've learned so much from you. Thank you so much. Okay? And
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Everybody, we hope that you've enjoyed this Doc of Detox show today. Don't forget, okay, to click and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube so you never miss any life-saving or life-changing information or any of our shows, okay? And thanks again for joining me on the Doc of Detox show. And understand something, okay? Light is at the basis of all life, okay? And as I say, you know what? Feed the spirit, heal the body. God bless. 3, 2, 1, you got this. If you're looking for life-saving and life-changing information, well, you've come to the right place. Don't forget to click and subscribe. Stay connected.